All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another session of the AI for HR virtual summit that we have here at Remote Base. So, my name is Bryce York, and I'm excited to be here as your moderator for this fireside chat we have. And our topic of discussion today is radical transparency, the need for agreed upon standards and client access for assessing product AI solution claims. So, like in today's rapidly evolving world of artificial intelligence, transparency has become a critical factor in building trust between, businesses and the clients and just a user base of AI. And it's essential for organizations to be open and honest about their AI solutions, ensuring the claims, number one, are accurate and reliable and most importantly verifiable. So the concept of radical transparency takes us a step further, right? And emphasizing the need for complete openness and accessibility. So throughout our session, we'll be exploring various aspects of radical transparency in the context of AI. And its impacts in the business world and clients alike. So we have Jerry here with us. He is actually the founder of Career Crossroads, to have this really exciting discussion. So, Jerry, could you do us a favor and kind of give us a little introduction into to who you are and what
Sure.
Career Crossroads is?
I think the simplest thing is I nurture a community of talent acquisition leaders in very large companies. I mean, that's basically it. It's a peer-driven, community of people who are trying to help one another, who meet my standard, which is that they are all passionate about recruiting, compelled to improve, have critical thinking skills, and are willing to share unconditionally. And that's a key issue. So about 100 companies, and we have an interesting time engaging one another.
Awesome, awesome, and you guys you've been at it for quite some time too, huh, Jerry?
25, 26 years doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, so you kind of know what you're doing.
I don't know about that.
Well,
That's another question. I'm constantly learning for sure.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Awesome. So, you're going to be, it's going to be a really good conversation with you, especially with your experience. So, why don't we go ahead and kick this off? And the first question I have for you, Jerry, is, how would you define radical transparency in the context of AI?
Yeah, I think that, we really should take it in stages. And the reality is that to me, radical transparency is a broader view. And obviously, the context of AI is going to be the critical piece of the discussion. But we have, I think, a point of view that is each stakeholder in the hiring process should have full access to the data they need to do their job and make informed decisions. Mm-hmm. And to me, that constitutes the criticality, if you will, of what radical transparency would be, because this also implies that each stakeholder must be held accountable, if you will, if they have access to that kind of data, and we should be able to measure against the expected results of that. And the simple question of it, let's say take a non-AI for the moment. From a non-AI point of view, there's several that are very clear. We think about just 10 years ago, mm-hmm. and what was pure transparency in relation to pay. It would be that you would tell me before I told you anything. Mm-hmm. You would tell me what you are currently being paid.
Right.
That would be the transparency. Its requirement is on a stakeholder who is the candidate, not on the employer. Think about how that has shifted in that 10 years. And today, if you asked a candidate, how much do you make? They're probably going to tell you the interview's over.
Yeah.
Because what I really want to know is, what is this job worth?
Right.
And it should be irrelevant what I'm making from my perspective, not necessarily the employer. So there's a lot of nuances going on. If I ask you as a recruiter to create a pool of diverse talent and to take from that a small slate of equally diverse talent to hand to the hiring manager, how many recruiters are going to have access to that data today? Only about 50% at most, because most companies restrict the recruiter's ability to understand what's going on in relation to the diversity of the talent pool from which they're drawing, forcing them to infer what's going on. So I believe that every recruiter should have that data fully accessible and then be held accountable for the decisions made. And another stakeholder, the hiring manager, if I'm giving a hiring manager over 10, 15 years the ability to see diverse slates of candidates whenever they need to hire, I have an expectation that over that time period, the diversity of his or her selection is going to be reflected in that as well. Right. So in AI, I'm convinced that we have to have full disclosure relative to the underpinnings of the technology that's involved in AI if I'm a client, number one. And that means that your proprietary algorithms, I need to be able to have access to. Because inside my organization, I may happen to have, for example, an industrial organizational psychologist or mathematical experts who fundamentally should be able to determine and verify whether or not those claims are real. Or I might want to hire a consultant externally to do the same. And if we back that up a bit, the vendor himself or herself who runs that technology ought to want to know, independent of their own people, whether or not their claims can be verified. So that's just a starting point, I think, in terms of what we're looking at.
Yeah, and the thing that you pointed out, which Jerry, I think is critical, is everybody wants to have the information, right? You know, that's one piece of it, right? But the tag that you put on that is "and held accountable."
Yes.
And that's important.
You have to be accountable for the information that you have in your hand, because that information can be used for good or ill, if you will. It can be stolen, it can be misused, it can be part of something that is going to cost you some money down the road. So we really need to have some degree of ethical approaches to that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it leaves or it removes the response of, I don't know, I just used this tool, which is AI, and it spit out this answer. I just did what it told me to do. Right.
Absolutely. And I would tell you that most employers today go, oh yeah, I don't need to know that, because if you screw up, you're the one who's going to be in trouble. And that's not true.
Right.
We know the truth of the matter is that if you screw up, if your tool, which claims to be unbiased, is in fact biased,
right,
it's not the vendor who's going to be in trouble first.
Right.
They may eventually be in trouble, but eventually, the first person on the block is going to be the employer.
Right, exactly. And if it's not transparent, and it's going to take a long time for that discrepancy to be identified, right? So there's going to have to be more and more and more use cases where it's like, okay,
because Bryce, it is not transparent.
Right.
Every vendor has their proprietary algorithm. They're not letting anybody touch them.
Right. And this stems to my next question, right? So we're talking about radical transparency in the AI. So how do you balance that? You know, you want the transparency, you know, because you also want to prove like, hey, look, our algorithm is right. Go ahead and use your third party, you know, references and whatnot to validate it. It is right. But it is our proprietary AI where we don't want people to steal.
There's a couple ways that you can go about it, and that currently are being used. And I think we're going to see a lot of evolution in the next couple of years for sure. We're only doing it because we can see the pending legislation out there, right? And the pending directives. So I'm not saying everybody's going, oh, this is the right thing to do. I'm
Hmm.
saying everybody's doing this because they see the footprints coming in your way, your
Hmm.
direction, and they need to be able to get ahead of it for those that are progressive. There's an awful lot of people way behind the eight ball who won't be there in a long time. But right
Hmm.
now, if I were to look at the most progressive companies, vendors out there, they're already finding partners who are signing strong NDAs, et cetera,
Hmm.
and they're spending money with them to independently do the work to verify the claims that the internal experts of the vendors are making. So if I'm making a claim that this tool will match within the framework of some kind of diversity, if you will,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
against that set, they are out there, I think, in relatively small numbers right now, but out there finding people who will help verify that for them. The problem is that if you talk to 20 different vendors who are doing this,
Hmm.
you're going to get 15 different organizations that they're using.
Hmm.
And now
Hmm.
the question is, do those organizations
Hmm.
are they under the gun because they're being paid by the company to do the verification? Do they feel,
Hmm.
is that a potential bias for themselves to begin
Hmm.
with? And secondly, even if they do as good a job as they possibly could from a technical point of view, is there any standard in terms of the methodology that they would commonly use, those
Hmm.
15, that we could point to? And the answer is we don't know,
Yeah.
because they don't talk to each other.
That was going to be my follow-up. So, which is interesting, like having third-party vendors that are validating the
Yeah.
claims. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's kind of the approach you want to go. The next thing that thought popped in my head is the standardization. So, I wonder if this would evolve into like an ISO cert.
Well, that's what you could expect to evolve at some point. The question
Hmm.
is, do we as an industry
Hmm.
move that needle faster and end up with a collective voice that influences what would be that coming legislation?
Hmm. Hmm.
Or do we wait for the legislation to tell us how to do this?
Yeah.
Given the hope that maybe they have tapped the kind of expertise that would make that appropriate and fair, et cetera. And based on history, I would suggest that it would be better, much better for us as an industry to
Hmm.
be more collective and more collaborative in our approach to this,
Yeah.
and actively get ahead of it
Hmm.
rather than wait for the next European directive or the next state or federal legislation that's going to come down, because it's going to.
Yeah.
So I'm just a fan of doing that. I think the other, if it were ideal, and I don't think we're going to get to the ideal, but the ideal would be that a collective group of vendors would underwrite a single independent group,
Hmm. Hmm.
who could then focus in on building standards, defending those standards, because
Yeah.
somebody's going to be asked about it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then when they're dealing with that, they're dealing with a whole variety of vendors, and obviously they're the
Yeah.
ones who would be signing the kind of NDA, if you will, or customer secrecy, whatever,
Yeah.
that would make the industry comfortable that nothing is getting out. This might be a nonprofit, for example.
Right. That doesn't have any
But no
stakes
one
in
no one
the
seems to
yeah.
be going there right now. I don't see anybody leading the way to build an independent group like that.
Yeah, I mean, having industry specific individuals that know the industry, know our industry inside and out, will be able to build a better
Yeah,
standardization
I
and
have a
things like
list of
that.
about a dozen companies that are attempting to do this,
Yeah.
and some of them are really good, extraordinary folks with great skills and knowledge, but but they're all operating independent of
Yeah.
each other.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I don't know how fast a standard is going to be developed, for sure.
Yeah, that would be tough. That would be tough. So, um, I guess the follow up is why is it so important to have a standard?
I think it's going to satisfy, because I think you need a standard, at least a method, not a
Yeah.
in cement kind of approach
Hmm.
that's going to cover everything, but an approach to how we think about what those claims are,
Hmm.
and how we align what those claims are to some kind of set of data. So for example, a standard might be that you don't take data from the vendor, you don't accept a vendor giving you that data.
Hmm.
You need to have access to the vendor's total set so that you take the data that's important.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
when you start talking about methods, you start getting very operational
Hmm.
in terms of where that data is coming from, so that the books aren't cooked even before you get it.
Yeah, it's a good point. Especially with AI, right? AI is just trained on the
Especially
data
with AI.
as the data sets that they're pulling from. Yeah.
And we know that it's a little more complex than something simple,
Yeah.
right? So many years ago, there was an independent group that evaluated the demographics of every newspaper in the United States. Every newspaper was required, based
Wow.
on their size, to pay into this kind of customer group, so that when the newspaper claimed what the demographics are of the people who read the job ads in the
Hmm.
newspaper, there was an independent verification of that.
Yeah.
And that's very simple.
Hmm.
This is a lot more
This is
complex,
up.
but
But
it's
the
same point.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Is the confidence in the result.
Right. And now you start building trust
Right.
against, how a vendor, if you will, demonstrates that the tool that they're developing is in fact worthy to be
Hmm.
considered.
So here's a follow-up question with that. AI is right now at this stage is rapidly evolving,
Yeah.
right? Rapidly evolving. So once you basically get standardized, once you get certified, if you will, if we had that in place, and then the AI changes,
Right.
we gotta, would you say that there needs to be like a recertification process or a timing or something like that that would create that cyclical?
Yeah. So, and who knows what that timing should be, right?
Right.
Maybe we're moving so fast that it may be a year before we even start getting to the point. And I think some of the legislation, by the way, may be ahead of our ability to comply with it. You know,
Yeah.
there's a couple things out there that I
Yeah.
that I would I would almost argue no one can do that.
Yeah.
So the point is, we should be thinking about it. We should be talking about it, and individual groups that are impacting and have penetrated the marketplace, and
Hmm.
where there's a lot of money being spent on the use of these tools.
Yeah.
It would seem to me that there better be more conversation going on, because the evolution is not going to excuse negative impact.
Right. Yeah.
So I, as a potential customer, as an employer who hires 5,000 people a year or 50,000 people a year, and
Hmm.
if it's 100,000, I'm a target. Um, so I'm going to be asking more questions about, here's what you say your product can do as a
Hmm.
solution. How do I know that that's accurate? How do I know
Yeah.
that that's true? How do I know that that isn't just a set piece in something that you set up,
Right.
or that you paid somebody else a lot of money to verify,
To
and
verify.
they were just and I don't know how they went about verifying that.
Right. Right. Exactly. It's a lot more complex than just saying, well, here's the algorithm. You
Right.
figure it out, right? Because there's a lot of individuals that are users of AI that are not developers of AI, so they don't necessarily know the nuanced aspects of an algorithm. So the importance of having a third party, a standardized third party validation that everybody in the industry trusts
Yeah, I
is
think the
incredibly important.
companies that are resource rich, so
Hmm.
employers who are resource rich, may for at least the next year or 2 years be in a better position to be the one that spends the money to hire somebody to
Oh, sure.
verify,
Yeah,
because then they can check the credentials of that. But most companies are not going to be able to afford to be able to do those kinds of things, and then pilot and hire
exactly.
and experiment and do a lot of the innovation that you need to be able to do.
Yeah.
So I'm convinced we need the industry itself to think and talk with itself about self regulation.
Hmm. Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agreed. So I guess on the flip side of this, what's the major risk if basically companies don't adopt the radical transparency mindset, or if they're like, hey, our data is our data, it's good?
Well, it's only radical because it hasn't been agreed upon to do this.
Fair point.
It won't be very radical when there's a suit and we're talking about millions of
Wow.
dollars. It won't be
Yeah.
very radical when the employment brand of a company is hurt because of their inability to deal with that.
Hmm.
So, those are some key issues that really have to be taken care of.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's not going to be. It's only radical because nobody's doing it right now. Yeah, it'll be
It's
an industry
only, you know
standard
what?
once the. Yeah.
Like I said, it was a radical notion that you would sit in front of a candidate and say, "Hey, look, before we talk about anything, let me tell you a little bit about how we go about offering compensation if we go forward. We're
Yeah.
obviously interested in you, and here's our philosophy about how we deal with salary, how we value benefits, how we look at this from a narrower perspective, and this is what you could expect if we get to the point where we're going to make an offer."
Hmm.
We First of all, that would have been blown away
Yeah.
5, 10 years ago, and today, even today, it's still a little bit radical because we still have to upskill recruiters to be able to have that conversation, as opposed
It's a
to
fair point. Yeah.
what do you think your expectations would be, because
Hmm.
that's a workaround that is almost as bad.
Yeah.
It's just a legal workaround. But fundamentally, increasingly, we know that candidates are concerned about that approach
Hmm.
almost as much as they are asking their salary.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to become more sophisticated, more nuanced. We need to upskill not only the recruiters. We need to upskill or certify the ability of hiring managers to have some of the conversations they have, in my
Absolutely.
opinion, downstream.
Absolutely. I think that's a very important point to be made as well, right? So the downstream, the hiring managers, and the impact that all this has on the hiring managers as well, and
Sure.
the consumers of the candidates and whatnot. So, um, yeah, I think that's 100% true. So the speed of evolution of AI is going to, I think, is going to force the hand of things that are considered radical now, to your point, to be standard. Like, and as quickly as this evolves, and as quickly as I guess the negative aspect of not being transparent really starts bubbling up to the surface, is as quick as it's going to be in regards to having that standardization and those certifications and things
Yep.
of that nature. So, yeah.
I think it's inevitable. I do think it's not on the table today
Hmm.
in a big way, and I'm sure that some of the audience watching this are going to go, "Oh no, oh no, that's not going to happen." I'm going. It will.
It will.
It's just not necessarily today. It may be in a year or 2 years.
It might be, and depending on the acceleration, it could be in 6 months. So it's a
Yeah,
crazy time that we're in with AI. So Jerry, I really appreciate the time.
my pleasure.
Absolutely enjoyed the conversation. I might be a little bit more paranoid right now about being the transparency on the AI, but it is a very valid point that it has to be there. So it's not just anymore. It's not just being very skilled in your prompt writing, but it's also understanding the data that's being spit out on the other side is
Cool.
correct. So
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
thank you, Jerry.
All right, Bryce.